Do you worry that your children spend too much time on their tablets and not enough time outside? Are you unsure how to find balance between exposing your children to modern technology and YouTube unboxing videos? We will tell you how on this episode of Happily Unmarried. Hi, my name is Danielle.
And my name is Danielle.
And you're listening to the Happily Unmarried podcast, a podcast about adulting and living your best life.
In this episode, we will talk about how to leverage today's technology to prepare your children for the real world and provide tips on how to balance screen time with everyday life. Children growing up today are exposed to all kinds of different technologies. For example, televisions, tablets, smartphones, PCs, or console games.
Right. The exposure is everywhere. So I think as parents, we find that it's hard to find a balance. You can't control all of the screen time your children have, right? They go to their grandparents' house, they spend time with their friends. But I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is, what can we do in the home to ensure that our children are being exposed to modern technology while not overdoing it?
Then maybe we should start with looking at some of the challenges that modern technologies pose for children, both actual challenges as well as kind of perceived challenges.
Right. I mean, there's a whole community of people, I think, that like to stir up this idea of, fear and what exposing their children to technology can do. Let's kind of cover what a few of these are.
Maybe we'll start with outlining some of these challenges that modern technology poses to children. And then later we can go over how we specifically address those challenges with tools and processes
that we've implemented at home.
Yeah.
So I think one of the first challenges that we hear about a lot is, screen time keeps kids sedentary. They're not getting up and moving around.
Yeah, that's a big problem. Then another thing is just like the amount of time they end up spending on their screens. Obviously, sitting on the screen may cause all these other problems, but a lot of times the screen pulls them in and they spend way too much time on it.
Right. There's also this idea that screens get in the way of actual learning, whether you believe that or not.
You're not reading any books in that time or learning something about the world. In addition, there's this perception that screens or technology can isolate kids from family and their peers. If you're staring at a screen, you're not going to talk to your parents or to your sister. You're not going to interact with your classmates.
Sure. And I think related to that one we mentioned earlier about getting in the way of actual learning, there's this idea that screens actually can stunt our children creatively because they're just passively consuming media.
Right. And then from the parents' perspective, when kids are reading a book or maybe even watching a TV show, it's very easy for us to kind of like monitor what they are doing and what they're consuming and what kind of media. Whereas on a lot of these modern devices, it's really hard to keep an oversight on what are the games that they're playing, what are the websites that they're browsing to, what is the YouTube video that they're watching.
And related to that is this whole stranger danger on the internet. And I mean, this has been going on since we were kids. Who are your children talking to online?
Yeah. And then there's the possibility of too much screen time causing physical effects on your children. I remember there was this article just a couple of weeks ago that talked about children growing horns from using tablets too much.
Maybe not horns, but...
Well, it was a very sensational article, but the headline was literally that children are growing horns. There's apparently a muscle that attaches to the back of your head. And when you're lowering your head all the time and looking down, then that bone can start growing, which will look like a horn a little bit.
That's terrible. But I mean, we all know what it feels like when we're staring at our screens for too long and what that does to our neck and our eyes and our shoulders. I can just imagine what it does to our children. And the other thing is, it's not just the physical effects, it's the developmental effects that too much screen time can play into, specifically around communication skills and problem-solving skills and being able to interact with other children socially and specifically around children who are very young.
Yeah, I think this is at least a good overview of some of the key problems or issues that people may face when dealing with children and modern technology. Maybe next, let's look at how we generally think about children and modern technology, like what our kind of general approach to this is.
Sure. I mean, as a couple, we believe that exposure to modern technology is in the best interest of our children. technology is not slowing down. If anything, it's only getting faster. And we don't want to put our children at a disadvantage by completely cutting them off from the latest ways to, interact with the world.
Yeah, it's like if somebody 100 years ago did not allow their children to read novels because they perceived them to have all these negative effects.
Well, I mean, there were people like that.
Well, that's what I mean. It's the novelty of the technology makes people skeptical, when in reality, the ability to proper engage with this technology and use this technology is critical for their success in later life.
And the other thing for us is, as a family, we are very tech forward. We both work in the tech industry. It's literally our job to help people have better experiences using the products that we serve.
Yeah. And then our house in general is very smart. We have sensors everywhere and voice assistants across the house that we use. So if we didn't allow our children to use modern technology, we would be quite the hypocrites.
Right. And especially since we use screens on a daily basis. I mean, not just in our personal life, but for our job. So it's kind of like telling your kid that they can't have a small slice of cake, but you're going to go in the kitchen and eat a whole cake to yourself, which I may or may not have done at one time or another. Visit happily.unmarried.media/support to learn how you can support our podcast.
And then we generally have a strong interest in technology and how technology develops and what the latest trends are, etc. Yeah.
Now, all this being said, we don't take our children's screen time lightly.
We've put into place a series of rules and tools meant to help us manage screen time in a way that our children can make the most of it.
Right. So why don't we take some time to go over the tools that we currently use and have used in the past to help manage our children's screen time. And one point actually that I do want to mention is that our children we have one child under a year old and we have one child that is 6 years old. So we're speaking specifically to young children. Come back to us in 10 years and we'll tell you what we've learned about teenagers, because I'm definitely not looking forward to that. So just a PSA that we're only talking about the young kids right now.
Right. So there's a whole range of different kid-friendly versions of app that you can use to help manage screen time and as well as the content that your child consumes on devices. So for example, we are using YouTube Kids, which is a kind of kid-friendly app with kid-friendly content specifically curated and selected for children.
So the one thing too, though, about YouTube Kids is that it is content for children, but that's also going to include the type of content that is marketing at your children. Specifically, I think we're all very familiar with the unboxing videos. We are not fans of unboxing videos. That is not content that we want our daughter to consume. There's a reason we don't have cable with commercials. So I think one of the things that we like best about YouTube Kids is that you actually can selectively whitelist specific content that you approve of, which means we pick the channels that she has access to, and she can only watch those channels on her YouTube. So another tool that we use, albeit our daughter is still a little young, I think, to use it successfully, is Messenger Kids. So this is Facebook Messenger. But again, as parents, it allows you to have a certain set of restrictions.
So one thing that it allows you to do, or that it does, is it restricts your child from being able to communicate with anyone. So if they want to connect with somebody on Messenger Kids, you have to whitelist that specific person. So that person has to be a friend of yours, and you need to explicitly allow the kid to communicate with that person. So for example, you can whitelist the grandparents and maybe one friend from school, and the kid will be able to send messages and photos and videos and whatnot that they record with their device to those people, but they won't be able to communicate with the creepy neighbor or something like that.
Right. And this works really well for us because, Danielle's family is in Europe. So this will allow our daughter to, send photos and chats to her grandparents and her cousin. And so while it might seem for some people, I think, well, why does a 6-year-old need access to Messenger? Well, that's the beauty of technology, is that you can allow your child to maintain contact on their own without you having to help them with family who might be all over the place.
Another tool that we've used for quite a while is Samsung Kids. Samsung Kids is a kid-friendly application launcher, basically. So what that means is when you boot up your tablet, instead of seeing your normal home screen, what you see is this kid-friendly UI that does two things. For one, it has curated content, games, shows, stories, music, videos, that kind of stuff, specifically for kids, for small kids. And it restricts the kid from using any other features of the tablet than those that you have explicitly whitelisted.
So it essentially locks them into the app. They can't exit out of Samsung Kids without your password. So this, again, is a way to keep children, off of YouTube or off of the internet, places that you don't want them to be exploring, but still giving them the freedom of accessing content.
Right. You can whitelist specific apps if you want to. So, for example, if you want your child to be able to use Spotify to listen to music, you can whitelist the Spotify app, and so they get access through the Samsung Kids environment to the Spotify app. In addition to restricting access to applications, what this does is it tracks usage of apps, so you can actually look at how much time your kid has spent on various different apps, as well as enforcing a time limit, a daily time limit for the tablet use. So you could configure it to say the kid can only use the tablet for an hour or 2 hours per day or whatever, and the application then will shut down once that limit was reached.
Right.
There's one noteworthy drawback. To be able to use Samsung Kids, you have to subscribe to a service which costs, I think, $40
a year. Yeah. And it's a little buggy, so it doesn't always work. There's been times where our daughter's managed to get herself out of the application somehow without our help. But other than that, I think as a first-time tablet for young children, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, and a lot of tablets that you specifically buy as a kid's tablet actually come with this app pre-installed.
Yeah. So more recently, though, we've kind of moved away from the Samsung Kids app over to Google Family Link. So Google Family Link is an Android built-in system for tracking and managing children accounts on Android devices specifically. And it does require the Android version of 7 or higher in order to use.
And noteworthy here is a lot of the cheaper Android devices, specifically for children, come with older versions of Android. So if you want to use Google Family Link, you need to make sure that you buy a more recent tablet with a more recent version of Android.
Similar to Samsung in that you have the ability to set and enforce daily time limits. But what's nice about it is you can actually have varying limits depending on the day. So, for example, during the week, our daughter can spend 1 hour a day on her tablet, but we give her more time on the weekend. So I think we were like 3 hours over the weekend.
And then we have No Screen Monday, which we'll talk about a little bit later, where she cannot use any devices. And so this is enforced in the system as well. So she can't use the tablet at all on Mondays. In addition, it basically has all the features that Samsung Kids has as well, meaning you can restrict access to apps. You can track how much time she spends on the various apps.
But there's some key differentiators between it. So one is that you actually can not only just set a daily time limit, you can choose the range of hours in which the tablet can be in use. So, for example, our daughter cannot use the tablet before 7 a.m. and then it shuts off at 8 when it's time to go to bed.
So even if she has time left.
She has time left, it gets shut off. And then the other thing is that, while the Samsung Kids app keeps them inside the environment, Google Family Link allows her to utilize her tablet as is, but it sets some restrictions specifically around her being able to download apps. So if she does go into the Google Play Store and attempts to download an app, we are notified, and then we have to approve the app before it can be downloaded.
Right, and that is true for both free as well as for paid applications.
Correct. And then the last thing, which I think we like most about it, is that we can manage this all from our phone.
Right, so there's a companion app that exists for both Android as well as iOS that allows you to manage the Google Family Link device remotely. So you can approve applications for installation, or you can change the time limits. You can grant additional time on the device.
Granting the additional time is a little different. I actually like it because while the Samsung Kids app, you have your 4-digit code, which if your kid's paying attention, they could probably see it and figure out what you're putting in. Google Family Link has an authenticator generator that goes and changes regularly. So you have to go into the app to get the current code, and then that goes into the tablet.
And it also allows you to, basically all the features that we just outlined, they are available from within that app. Whereas with Samsung Family Link, you actually need to physically take the tablet, the kid's tablet, put in your parental code, and then you can navigate the menus and information on that kid's tablet, which is a little bit inconvenient. So if you can do it on your own phone, it's significantly better. And so then if you're an iOS user or have too much money and want to buy an iPad for your 6-year-old,
congratulations.
iOS has a similar feature to Google Family Link as iOS parental controls. I believe so we've not used those because our child has an Android tablet, not an iOS tablet. But I believe there's a similar set of functionality. It's, I think, a little bit less sophisticated, but basically all the similar features are there. Approval of app downloads, setting time limits, etc.
Follow us on social media to get a peek behind the scenes. We are at Unmarried Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay, so we've talked about the tools that we use, but that's only one part of this, right? The other half is content, right? So we put a lot of tools into place to help us manage how much time and what our children have access to, but you also still have to address the actual content that your children are consuming.
Yeah. So let's start with television, the classic media consumption device. So
we don't have cable.
We don't have cable. All of the shows, whatever, are either coming from YouTube or from streaming services like Netflix. But we do have a specific set of content that we like to expose our children to when we're talking about watching TV. We allow our little one, the 9-month-old, occasionally to watch some TV. He has his little, what do you call that thing? I don't know, a
little jumping
a walker
chair.
Yeah, it's like you sit him in there. He can stand in it and he can walk around in it, even though he cannot actually walk yet. So you can sit him in there and he'll happily watch for 30 minutes or something a TV show. Specifically, we like to play Baby Einsteins for him, which is
classical music with pictures and children and activities that are brightly colored and interesting to small children.
Yeah, it's specifically designed for babies and toddlers. Mm-hmm. The other thing that we like to play to him, I don't know if we ever mentioned this before, but we are raising our children bilingually. And so there is a show on Amazon Prime Video. We like to call it just the Panda Show. Yeah. I think it's technically called Little Pims. It's basically a language show. So they will show objects and things and people interacting with each other and then speak in German, in this case, what they are doing or what they can see.
Right. So we'll put that on for him just as, additional one. Again, it's fun for him to look at. There's children on the screen, there's music, but just more attempt at exposing him to German.
Right. And in case you're interested, they do have these for other languages as well, not just German.
The other thing that we, recently have started putting on, I think mainly because our daughter was a big fan of it, is Daniel Tiger, which ties into just the PBS catalog in general. So we actually purchased the PBS subscription through Amazon because the PBS shows are grounded in education, right? They have a spelling show. They have a show that talks about history. They have a show that talks about wild animals, and these are cartoons geared towards children. So, if our children are going to watch television, these are the types of shows that we are encouraging them to watch.
And then you can't get around it. Then there's also some Netflix that especially our older daughter watches, and she has this weird affinity.
It's cute.
This weird affinity for cooking shows.
She loves to watch cooking shows.
All these competitive cooking shows like Chopped or whatnot, like she loves them. She watches
baking shows.
Right.
Yeah. She's a big fan of watching people cook. Yet I can't get her to eat half the things I make. And it has other things like, Our Planet was a series that we sat down and watched together. We watched an episode every night and kind of talked through what was happening. And,
like walruses.
Oh my God, that was the worst. She was so upset. I was upset. That was horrifying. I was not prepared for the walruses.
You should go and watch it.
If you haven't seen it, be prepared.
Bring tissue.
Bring lots of tissue. But again, it opened up a dialogue. And to be fair, we're not perfect, right? She's going to watch shows And sometimes we let her watch shows that aren't ones that we are particularly fans of. But whenever we can, we are enforcing her to watch, more education-based television.
Yeah. Let's move on to some more modern media, away from TV, more to stuff from the internet. So specifically for YouTube, she watches YouTube. She likes watching YouTube. She has a specific selection of content that we try to gear towards her and her interests, while also trying to address some of the potential shortcomings of sitting in front of a screen too much. So specifically, there's a whole like YouTube is full of science and education channels, both for grown-ups, and I personally like to watch a lot of those, but also specifically for children. And so in the set of content that she is allowed to consume, there's a bunch of those. So for example, there's a channel called HiHo Kids, which is mostly children interacting.
I mean, there's a few different types of videos that are in HiHo Kids. There's ones that she enjoys where it's kids, being adventurous and trying different foods from different countries, and they have a whole series around that. But then they also have this really interesting series where they have children sit down with somebody who has there's something very specific. It kind of reminds me of like a Reddit AMA where like they'll sit down with a refugee or a bodybuilder or someone who's transgender, and children just ask questions. And this series specifically I really like because unless she comes across these things in her real life, and that would then be the opportunity to talk about these things, she's being exposed to them through her media.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting part of HiHo, on top of just kind of the fun, kids doing science experiments and eating weird stuff.
Yeah. Another channel that is great, I think, is SciShow Kids. So I love to watch the grown-up versions of that. But they have a channel specifically tailored towards kids, kid-friendly content, put together in a way that is easily understandable for kids. They address, I would say, classic science topics to a degree, but kind of in a way that children can understand them.
And find interesting.
Yeah.
Another set of channels that we allow her to have access to on YouTube. And I think this kind of addresses one of the concerns of children, having too much screen time. It's that kind of sedentary, just sitting around, not doing anything. So one of the first ways she interacted with YouTube was via yoga for kids. So specifically, there's a channel called Cosmic Kids Yoga. And it started when I brought her to a yoga class with me randomly once, and she really enjoyed it and she wanted to continue doing it. And I came across this channel that is yoga geared at children, and she loved it. And so, she'll randomly decide that she wants to do yoga, and she'll get out her mat and sit in front of she'll cast, to the TV, and she'll do yoga. She also really likes to dance. She loves to dance. So we'll give her access to the Just Dance videos where she's, learning dance routines. She really enjoys that as well. So those are the kind of things that is great about getting your children active if maybe for some reason or another you can't get outside.
Yeah. And then she also loves to sing and music in general. So another channel that she watches a lot is Kidz Bop.
She loves Kidz Bop. That girl gets some moves from Kidz Bop.
It's true.
But yeah, again, she'll put that on. She'll sing along. She'll dance.
And then she'll be very confused when she listens to the original song on the radio. It's like, this is different. Yeah, why are there bad words in this song? Did you know that you can listen to our podcast on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play Music, and even on our website? Just search for Happily Unmarried Podcast and don't forget to subscribe. In terms of games, when she plays games on her tablet, we try to give her a selection of games that add value, where she can practice her logical reasoning and combination skills, as well as be creative in some way. Obviously, she will want to have some games that are a little bit simpler and less educational maybe, so we don't completely withdraw her from those. But we try to provide her a selection that she generally approaches. So some examples here are Minecraft, which I think is one of the best educational games. And frankly, it doesn't even matter how old your kid is. There has to be a certain minimum age. 5, 6 is probably...
Yeah, she's 6 and just now she's actually getting in it and building stuff and not just kind of walking around.
Yeah, but I occasionally still fire up Minecraft and play it because it's so much fun. It's a little bit like a digital Lego toy, right? Where you can build things and be creative, but also it's very deep. So you can get into a lot of details in terms. So it implements an entire kind of like logic kit where you can build contraptions that automatically process things and execute tasks within the Minecraft world. And so if you're like a programmer or interested in this kind of stuff,
it's the foundation for programming, like from starting for like children.
Exactly. Yeah.
We also, speaking of programming, recently came across a game that we think is pretty neat. Same kind of concept. It's called Scratch Junior, where
in Scratch Junior, the idea is basically it allows children to create short stories and kind of like clips, kind of like compose their own little movie or video by having characters and actors and interact with each other and respond to each other and trigger off of each other. And so the neat thing about this is this entire thing you need to basically implement in a semi-programming style environment. It's all visual and all very easy to understand, but you do have to kind of like
create steps.
So like let the character move left for 5 steps and then move up for 1 step. And then if character A and character B collide, then
one disappears.
Yes.
Yeah. It helps with kind of the logic piece. And she seems to really enjoy that game.
Yeah.
And she actually, and the other thing was she picked it up really quickly. Mm-hmm. One day she didn't quite get it. I think she spent a couple minutes with you on it, and then the next day she was showing me how she was making her characters do all these things. So I thought that was really cool. And then lastly, in regards to creativity, coloring apps and puzzle apps.
Yeah, so we actually got her a tablet that has like one of these like digital pens with it, so she can actually quite naturally color on her tablet and draw and paint basically on her tablet, which is specifically when we travel a lot, we're like on the road a lot, and that allows her to do a thing that she really enjoys, like even when we're not at home and don't have paper with us and pencils and whatever.
So music is something that our children really enjoy. It's something that we enjoy. And again, the nice thing about, having access to things like a tablet or, a Google Home is the ability to applications like Spotify, Google Music, iTunes. So specifically with Spotify, we have a family plan.
Yeah, family account, yeah.
So she actually has her own Spotify account, which means that the stuff that she's listening to isn't going to mess up our algorithms. But this allows her to, play the music she likes. We were able to create playlists for her and folders of the stuff that she listens to regularly so she can easily access it. And that way she can put, whether she's utilizing her tablet or she's cleaning her room, she can, play and listen to whatever music she wants to listen to.
And so one last thing that we're currently introducing her to is podcasts and like stories. Maybe if you're our age as a kid, maybe you had cassette tapes that you listened to that with stories or something. This style of content still exists, but today it's in the form of podcasts essentially. So this is another great way how you can provide quality content, educational content to your child, especially if you maybe have some kind of speaker, voice assistant or something in their room. They can very easily just ask to play a specific podcast or specific story.
And it's great for the car too, right? That's a piece of media that you can consume with your children.
Yeah.
So, similarly to how we listen to audiobooks, they have these short stories that are perfect for, a car ride.
So then the last thing, in addition to tools and content, is the processes that we apply and enforce. We mentioned a couple of things already, but I think the most important rule that we have is the limited screen time. So during weekdays, we limit her screen time to an hour per day.
On her tablet.
She can watch some more TV, and she generally in the evening watches some TV, but we try to limit that as well to not...
And in the evening, it's typically we're watching something with her.
Yeah, we'll watch together, yeah. mostly cooking shows.
The other thing that we've done that actually I think has worked really well is that we have a dedicated no screen day. And that's not just for her, although we still have to work sometimes. We try our best.
She will remind us.
Yes, she will remind us, where we essentially nobody uses a screen. So we tend to listen to a lot of music on Mondays, and she helps with cooking, and it's just a way to kind of detox from all of that. And again, remind her that she can still live her life without a screen.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we also try to have other days have dedicated non-screen activities. So, for example, Wednesdays we will play board games together, which it's not that she's not allowed to watch any TV on Wednesdays, but at least for half an hour or whatever time we spend playing board games, she'll be removed from the screen and we'll spend time together.
And it's
have fun
something
together.
she's excited about.
Yeah.
Too. So, and it's just a nice activity that we can all do together. And, also, on the weekends, getting out in the backyard, whether it's chalk or bikes or just doing something outside without a screen.
Yeah, encouraging her to do things that do not involve a screen.
Right. The other thing or a couple other things that, I think are really important is that we have to educate our children on screen time, on the content that they're consuming. And that requires us as parents to sit down and actually talk to them about what they're doing. So when our daughter submits a request to download apps, we'll approve them. But then, after a day or two, we'll sit down with her and say, okay, take us through these apps that you've downloaded. What are they? What are you doing? Have you played them? And then we discuss whether or not we think that it's something that she thinks she should be spending her time on. Does she think this is valuable? And then we remove them.
Yeah. So having access to all these tools and processes does not relieve you as a parent from doing your due diligence and putting in the time and effort to understand what your children are doing.
And then the last thing is, our children are growing up in a technological world. Depending on how old you are, you may or may not be able to relate to that, but it's important to engage your children in conversations about the things that they're doing. What is their favorite game? What is their favorite YouTube channel? Ask them questions, get them to talk to you about it, right? These are skills that, some would say they are losing by spending so much time on screen. So it's our job as parents to engage our children, ask them questions, get them to tell us what they're learning, and have those interactions.
Right. And if you show interest, you will be surprised how excited a kid can talk about Minecraft or whatever other game they're playing and show you all the things that they have built. I think a lot of times the problem when we're talking about modern technologies and video games and whatnot is actually not the children consuming that content, but their parents not understanding what they're doing, what's going on, and not showing any interest in that. So if you show interest and you ask questions, children will blossom and will be super excited, and you can feel much more confident that what they're doing is actually valuable for them, for their personal development, compared to what you might have thought otherwise.
The reality of the situation is our children are growing up in a world full of technology. It's not slowing down. And frankly, by restricting your children from having any access to technology, you are putting them at a disadvantage. They will be behind by the time they get to high school. They will need to utilize technology to do their assignments, to prepare for college, to have I just get so frustrated. And I think the reason why I get so frustrated about this is there's a whole idea that we should be protecting our children from technology.
Like, you go out and teach your children how to use scissors or sharp objects like knives responsibly as well. You guide them in using them and learning how to use them instead of not letting them have access to scissors until they're 18.
At the end of the day, it is our responsibility as parents to not take the easy way out. We need to ensure that our children are safe and that they are benefiting from technology. And in order to do that, you can't let screens babysit your children. You have to put in the work.
Well said. I think we touched on everything that we wanted to talk about. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this podcast, leave us a thumbs up, comment, star, or review, and make sure to subscribe.
How do you handle children and technology? What rules do you have for screen use? What tools do you use to enforce them? What content do you select for your kids? Let us know in the comments below or on Twitter at Unmarried Media. I am Danielle.
And I'm Danielle.
And we are happily unmarried.
Or a gun. Let's teach our 8-year-old how to shoot a shotgun, but God forbid they spend 2 hours on YouTube.
Right. Well, this escalated quickly.